MLG days to like the current ESL and OGN implementations of esports. I mean, right now they have like fully customizable cameras tracking players and like UI that shows a lot of detail that the actual players don't see. And even like you mentioned AR style overlays for the analysts to talk through in between matches and things like that. Were there any particular like innovations like that you worked on that you're proud of helping to implement on any of the games?
So AR was something that was a hot topic at ESL towards the later half of my career there, the later 2 years. And while I wasn't hands-on with any of the projects that went through with AR, it was an ongoing discussion. And that was probably one of the most fun I had trying to innovate with new tech. And also one where I think the fruit that it bore made a good enough impact in the industry. Because AR was something when it first came out, everyone was like, we gotta use it. And then everyone used it and it was bad and the tech was bad and it was overdone. And then we're like, okay, we like can't use it, it's too expensive. And then no one used it for a while. And I was like, well, no, there's probably a way to do it. And I'd start, looking up a lot of sports references where they would use it in the studio and say, okay, well now we have to calculate the cost of this. Isn't stuff that should be used all the time, but can it have a great impact, like you said, on an analyst desk or something like that? Absolutely. But if it's the same thing we're going to show, like for instance, if I'm just going to show a KDA and that's it, like why not just show a graphic, right? Like why not just show a 2-box? Because the cost it takes to bring in that camera and the tracking just isn't worth it. And no one's going to sit there and be like, oh, I'm turning off the stream because it's a graphic instead of AR, right? Like no one's going to do that. So then we started thinking about, well, what more can we do? And it's like, well, maybe we can do like live comparisons because things that move are a little bit more animated when it's 3D. Or maybe we can put like the actual model of the player instead of just a picture, so it's a little bit more personable. Maybe it's characters being animated like they do at TI and other Dota tournaments, where that actually doesn't add too much meaning, but it's just good fun. And it really lets you get into the game of like, oh, these characters are going to battle. These heroes are going to go out there and they're going to fight on the Dire side and Radiant side. Like that's a lot of value if you can afford it. So that was a discussion I had a lot of fun with. Some of the other things I would say is I had a lot of fun trying to implement what oftentimes people who follow Korean esports will call like the OGN style opening. So I might ruin this for everyone, but if you ever watch an OGN show, like ever in any game, the opening is always the same. There is a formula for how they open every single esports tournament. And there's a set number of shots they do. It doesn't matter what stadium they're in, what studio they're in. It's like the perfect timing, and the lower thirds always come in on like the third shot or whatever. But for a while, it worked out because it was one of the better ways to portray where you were and what was at stake. So the first time I did that was I brought that in for one of the very first shows we did for Heroes of the Storm out of Burbank. And we didn't have much to work with, right? We didn't have a huge studio. We didn't have fans. And so I had to kind of fake it and take different shots within the studio. And like anyone with a good eye could tell, this was really hodgepodge and it wasn't at the same level of OGN. But then some of my friends and other producers who had watched OGN were like, oh, that's cool. Like, I really like that you did that. I really like that you brought that style in, but you made it so that it wasn't like awkward or too unfamiliar for the Western audience. Because a lot of the shows in the West just start differently, right? Even if you look at other TV shows, things are formatted differently across regions. So that was an interesting project to work on, where I told them, like, I even remember I went in and said, if you give me like X amount of dollars to make this like one animation, I know it doesn't sound like it's worth it, but I will like use it in the opening and other segments and I will make it worth it. Like, just trust me this one time. And let's divert this budget into this like literally one animation that was like storms around the Heroes of the Storm symbol. That's what it was.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh, man, for an animation? Like, we're going to put in money for one animation? I was like, we're going to use it to the max. And so we had that conversation. And it was a lot of fun. And it was cool to be able to start crossing that bridge. That was really big for me, of mixing and crossing the differences between the cultures, both just at a base level, but also around esports between Korea and the West.